Hello YouTube, Edward here, with a follow-up episode on how graphs, charts and other visualizations of data can be used when creating reports using the Oracle BI suite. So after having discussed pie charts in the previous episode, let's have a look at all the other types of visualizations that Oracle BI has to offer. In this episode I will quickly go over the bar chart, the performance style, the different gauges, the line and the area chart, the radar chart, and finally I'll show how the waterfall chart is nothing more than a bar chart with a twist. I will focus on the specific features of each of the visualization types in order to limit repetition, as a lot of these visualization types have a lot of things in common. I could also spend some time on the different aggregation types there are, but I'll keep that for a future episode. For this one, I'll just go with whatever comes default out of the box in my particular instance of Sales Cloud. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Do you recognize this report? This is the pie chart we made in the previous episode. If you haven't seen it yet, go and have a look first, as the rest of this episode will make a lot more sense. In that episode, I already mentioned that for this amount of data, the pie chart would not be the best visualization, as a pie chart should never have more than 3 or 4 slices. A bar chart would be a lot better. So let's add one. Remove the pie chart, and under New View, under Graphs, I add a vertical bar chart. There we go. Like a pie chart, a bar chart is perfect to compare groups of data. In this case, to compare the closed opportunity revenue for all of the industries. Let's see how making a bar chart is different from a pie chart. Go into edit mode. In the layout definition, you actually hardly see a difference. You need a measure, something will be summarizing or aggregating. For the pie chart, this generated the slices, and here it will generate the bars. And then we had a few other options. Remember how with the pie chart, I showed you how the slider worked? Exactly the same thing for a bar chart. Or how you could add a prompt where the user could pick a country in order to see then how industries would size up to one another. Exactly the same for the bar chart. The only difference is that we now can use the vary by color area differently. For a pie chart, this would generate a lot of different pies, remember? Here it will generate a lot more bars. Let's switch them around, by the way. I think that would make more sense. Here you clearly see how bars are grouped per country, and then for every country there is a bar with a different color for each of the industries. Whenever you have so many bars per country, or per whatever is at the horizontal axis, you have the option to stack these bars. Or, in this case, if you would like to understand how within each of the countries the different industries are doing, you could even put them at 100% vertical stacked. Although the bar for Brazil in actual closed opportunity revenue was quite small, hardly noticeable, at least now I can see that 100% of whatever revenue was generated is therefore high technology. Let's go over all the other options, but let me first simplify this bar chart again. So what else is there? Well, there's the obvious things, like I can put them in horizontal mode, or instead of rectangles I can use cylinders, although that's better seen when you put it in 3D mode. And there are some other forms we can play with. I don't care whatever you choose, and excuse me for saying this over and over again. Just pick one and then stay with it. Make sure that all your reports use the same format. It adds to the consistency and the trustworthiness of your reports. All there's left to do is check out the remaining formatting options. Under Graph Properties, We can set the width and the height of the bar chart. We can specify the position of the legend. Different from a pie chart is this third tab, Scales. What Scales allow us to do is visualize these horizontal lines. Hold on, let me go back. These horizontal lines, the grids as we call them. We can specify how often we want to see them under the Scales tab. And as we have an extra element to the chart, under Style there is the option to also style these. Choose the color and such on. Something I skipped with pie charts was the conditional formatting. Let me highlight this here. Under conditional formatting, there's actually two ways of styling the bars. I could just assign them a fixed color, everything in red, and as earlier on with the countries, if I would have had multiple bars per country, I could assign hard code almost the colors here. They're all red. The other option is to use conditional formatting. Let's add some conditional formatting so we clearly can see which are the good performing, the better performing industries compared to the rest. Let's set the bar at 40 million. So if my closed opportunity revenue is greater or equal than 40 million, then the color should be green. If the closed opportunity revenue is less than 40 million, then I want to see them in red. There you go. In one glance, I can identify the better performing industries right away. The last tab shows us how to format the titles and the different labels. Again, what I would do here is not specify industry, as that should be quite obvious for anybody using this report. So let's get rid of the horizontal axis title. And then I have twice closed opportunity revenue. As this is truncated, I'm going to keep this one. So I remove the vertical axis title also. There you go. That's all there is to know about bar charts. Performance styles are all about showing one single value. They're a great way to visualize a KPI, a key performance indicator. But I also like to use them as totals. As standard table totals are first of all quite small, and they're at the bottom of a table. And if that table is long, let's say multiple pages long, you only get to see them when you're at the very end. That means or a lot of scrolling or a lot of clicking. So let me show you how I use performance styles. Under New View, we can add them directly, a performance style. Put them on top. Let's see how performance styles work. First and for all, as you already noticed, they aggregate the data all the way up, as high as they can. This is the total. There was only one measure to choose, but in case you would have multiple ones, you could choose them here, or you could add two performance styles showing each of them. And then there is some styling options. I like showing the label underneath the measure and not above. So let's do that. As this might be quite long, I'm going to truncate it. All that's left is a little bit of styling. For instance, I like giving it a certain size, a certain color, and in bold. There we go. You see that it truncates a bit. Let's fix that. Done. Let's go into the properties of the view of this performance style. And there's some neat options here. I can specify the size of this thing. So let's make this a bit wider, slightly less high. as the bigger the performance style is, the further to the bottom my table goes, and I still want to see what's on the table. And I give it a little border color too. Let's have a look at this first. That's not bad. What you see, by the way, is that the total automatically gets compressed. If you don't like that, in a few properties, you can just undo that. But to be honest, I don't need to know what's behind that decimal point. Last thing to do is, as I made my performance style less high, I've lost the label. Let's utilize the available space in the most optimal way. There we go. My performance style is done. Now on this performance style, nothing tells me whether or not this is a good value. There is the option to add some conditional formatting, but I think using gauges in this case would be a lot better. So let's have a look at the 3 types of gauges there are. First off, the dial. First thing you notice is that dials are quite big. Next thing is, yes, there is a dollar value, but you end up displaying percentages all the time. So let's have a look at the different options we have to configure this dial. Go into edit mode. Straight off the bat you see a very familiar layout definition area. I'm counting something, in this case again the closed opportunity revenue. And I have the option to, with a slider or not, go through a dial for each of the different industries, or use a prompt so the end user can choose one. Or have a dial for each of the industries. Actually, the dial was quite big. Let's make it a bit smaller. That's reasonable. Let's see how we can further define our dial. First thing to do is actually not on this screen. What I like to do is first set what the maximum value is that the dial should be taking into account. Let's say that that would be 600 million. There we go. The percentage value now shows that I am at 67% of that 600 million. That should be about right. By default, it puts me in the green area as it splits up this 100% in 3 sections of 33, but those are adjustable. Let's consider anything above 400 million, okay? So I hard code the value to 400 million. And anything under 150 million is an issue. See how my dials change? Last thing to do is change these labels. I already mentioned that red was an issue, so let's call it that way. Critical is nice too. There you go. And you can of course change these. Last thing is go over the remaining formatting options. The general things, where to put the legend, in case you have multiple gauges, how many per row, styling, everything you would expect, scales, we mentioned already, and actually I hard-coded it to 600 million. There's all kinds of options here to use a value that's already somewhere in a column, or even go into scary SQL mode. The different ticks, I could say I want 16 ticks, which is a bit ridiculous, but at least it shows what's happening. There we go, now I have 16 ticks, as you see. And then the titles and labels, there's everything that we've got to know with pie charts and bar charts. This dollar value, by the way, is shown because I use the &1 notation here. If I take it out of the footer, then it goes away. Done. Next is the bars. The horizontal and vertical bar work exactly the same way, but for this exercise, I'll use the horizontal one. It's basically a dial, but flattened out. Same formatting options, and same layout definition. Last one to check out, the bulbs. Identical in the way you build them, to the dials and the bars, but they actually function more like a traffic light. It's red, yellow, or green, and there's no more information. But they're simple, they're clear. I like using them. You should definitely give these a try. Line charts is something we're all very familiar with. They're great to track changes over time. That's why I had to change my data table. I no longer have revenue per industry, I now have revenue per month. So let's add a line chart and discuss the different options we have. Under New View, Graph, I add the line chart. Very nice. I can see over time how my closed revenue has been growing. In order to make one, there's nothing really new. We have a measure, we group by. In case we have multiple lines, we can vary them by color. We can use sections or prompts. The formatting options are different though. We can have these sharp lines, or we can smoothen them out by making them curved or stepped. Now let's go back to standard. And I can even put a line in 3D mode. Who would have thought that? Formatting option wise, don't think there's much new. It's everything we've gotten to know so far. Styles and scales, like with dials, pretty similar. Titles, same thing. But there's something special about tracking things over time. You would expect that, like here for 2013, there's only 4 months. Where are the other ones? Well, the normal line just ignores those, as there was no closed opportunity revenue value for those months. But we have a solution to that. Let's get rid of this line chart and make a special one. Something we call a time series line. And you'll now see that for each of the years there is a similar amount of space reserved and just peaks on each of the dates, as I added a date field instead of the month to make this line a bit more precise. Unlike with bars, there's one thing you cannot do with lines. And by the way, bars can also be used to track changes over time. And sometimes they're even better. Bars are great when the changes over time are more dramatic, are bigger compared to one another, when the jumps in between months or periods are big. When the line is smoother, when the changes are less big, it's better to use a line chart. The one thing a bar chart can do and a line chart cannot do is stack different values. Like in this case, I have 2 values that I would like to put on top of one another in order to see the total for each month. You can't do that with a line, unless you use an area chart. Identical to the way you add line charts, but you can stack them. Or use a similar option to the bar chart, where instead of normal stacked, we go and use the 100% stack mode. Again, this doesn't show me exactly what are the actual values for closed and lost opportunity revenue, but I can see how they compare relative to one another. Radar charts are great to show multiple measures in a 2-dimensional chart with the axis starting at the same point. To break it down, in any case where you have a bunch of numbers that in some way relate to one another, but you don't really want to compare to one another, you can use a radar chart to somehow display them together without there's any relationship between the different numbers. There's no need to compare chat activities and demo activities or email activities. There's absolutely no relationship of comparison needed between them, but this is a nice way to show them together anyway. Sometimes, really very seldomly, this particular shape could tell us something about what's going on, but most often not at all. Build-wise, nothing new to what we've seen so far. Formatting-wise, all the usual suspects. Waterfall charts are actually bar charts with a twist. In this case, I made a little report showing me for each of the quarters in 2013 the closed opportunity revenue. If I would make a normal bar chart on top of this data, then I would see the closed opportunity revenue for each of the quarters. It's quite interesting. Let me show you how a waterfall works, and then we can compare the two. I add a waterfall, or a step as it is sometimes called, and now I see the different quarters, still the same values, but you see how they build up to a total. I see increases, and if I have the right data, I could even see decreases. So it's a way of showing a bar chart, but you work towards a total, and you see how that total has been built up, in this case over time. As you probably expect with everything we've seen, build-wise, there is nothing new. My axis, I can summarize. I have my group by, I have my sections with the slider or not, and the prompts. I can play with colors though. It's even better seen when I go into format properties. Nothing new here, but in styles, I can have the first bar have a special color, then every increase a color, a decrease another color, and a total a separate color. Scales and titles and labels are identical. That was, I hope, a nice overview of most of the visualization types available in the Oracle BI suite. I skipped a few though, on purpose, for different reasons. The line and bar and Pareto, as they are nothing more than combinations of what we've seen in this episode. And then there's the sales funnel, the trellis, the heat map, the scatter, and the bubble chart, as they're more sophisticated. And I would like to do some other episodes first on other topics. Next one is all about the pivot table, by the way. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions or remarks, leave them in the comments and I'll check them out as soon as I can. Ciao.